All right, we have Derek Powell with us today,
Okay,
author from Republic of Ireland, if I'm correct.
that's correct.
Is it Dublin?
Dublin, yep,
In Dublin, and you are the brains behind the Filthy Henry series.
that's the one.
So tell us a little bit about the Filthy Henry series.
So Filthy Henry at this stage is probably 7 or 8 years old. It came up. I'm a big fan of Constantine, the comics, the Hellblazers, the original Vertigo imprint, as well as Doctor Who and that kind of stuff. So I was thinking about writing a book, couldn't come up with an idea that was I felt original. Um, then one day, it just literally he just popped into my head this character called Filthy Henry, and he would investigate fairy-related crimes in Ireland. And each story is kind of based off then the old Celtic legends. So I take a Celtic legend, I flip it on its head so that it's modern, and then it becomes a crime that Filthy Henry has to solve. Um, I'm not overly serious when it comes to writing. I find it very hard to write a purely serious one. So I kind of went in the vein of Terry Pratchett and made them a comedy fantasy series, which is pretty good then because you can have a bit of fun with what you're doing. You can have a very serious case, but then Filthy Henry's quite sarcastic. So in the middle of something like dark and gloomy, he can say a sarcastic thing to the villain, and it kind of keeps everything light. And that was the genesis of the first one. And then I just kept on going then after that. So I'm currently working on the fifth one, and I've got 4 of them published and available upon Amazon and Kindle and all the e-readers and places like that.
That's interesting. I've seen an Amazon review because I am going to be buying these books. One of the reviews compared you to Douglas Adams, the author of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, that must be a new one. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah. And I thought, and I've read the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I really do like that dry, absurd humor.
Yeah,
just, you don't know where it's going. It's like I wonder what he was on when he wrote those things, but they're hilarious. And the 2005 adaptation is just as good.
Yeah,
does it justice. And I don't know if it's a cultural thing because I think a lot of that does go over the Americans' head. That goes over the Americans' heads. It's just.
I don't think they understand sarcasm.
Sarcasm, no,
satire,
it doesn't really land.
Tongue in cheek, it's interesting stuff. So when you're writing this series, like, you get ideas and just write them down and then just think, oh, that's a good one, and then you just put it to one side and keep it there, or do you just remember it?
Yeah, so funny enough, I actually have it just here. So this is a gift that my wife got me, and it's literally my ideas pad. So I scribbled them down. I know most people probably keep them on their phone or up in an email or something that they but I traditionalist to a certain degree. So as ideas would pop into my head, I'd scribble them into that, and then flesh them out later on in a document file up on a laptop or something. I would have read a lot of the Celtic legends growing up, so I'm kind of fairly familiar with most of them. So I kind of aspects that I would want to pull in, I already have floating around. I have a couple of Celtic fairy tale books floating around the house as well that I use for kind of inspiration, for when I need to come up with a new idea for a story. But the first 4 pretty much just all fell out from stuff that I would have read as a child, and was obviously just hanging around in my head somewhere. And how do I make this a thing that Filthy Henry will be involved in? The 4th book then coincided with the birth of my first child, so I wrote a character into it that is basically, it's meant to be her. So she's like a leprechaun bounty hunter, and she's a badass, and she kind of keeps Filthy Henry on his toes. And now in the 5th one, my second child is going to feature in the 5th one as actually it's a bit of a spoiler if I say what he is. So, but he's going to be a fairly integral character to the story at the end of it all. And it's kind of just a little bit of a way to include them in the stories then as well.
Like that, that you use real Celtic mythology, because the audience themselves, even if they're not into the genre, they themselves are going to feel like they can relate to it if they're familiar with that.
Yeah, exactly. The current one actually features the Headless Horseman, which has basis in Celtic mythology, and it wasn't an intentional kind of like trying to tick a PC box or anything, but I found a couple of legends where the Celtic horse or the Headless Horseman is actually a female instead of just a male. So it turns out the original version of the myths have female and male versions of the character. So I was like, oh, that's good. I'm actually going to include that. So then when Filthy Henry first encounters them in the story, he's like, I thought you were meant to be a dude. And she educates him on how he should go off and read a book, and that there's more to history than just what you're currently aware of. So that was a nice little touch.
Was it difficult to like intertwine Celtic fairy tale legends with reality?
No, so I kind of came up with a rule system that the world exists around. So the fairies live alongside humans, like right next to us. They walk down the street right beside us. But because people, when they get older, they stop believing in magic, they don't see the fairy creatures in the world. And then children who have great imagination up till a certain age, they're like talking to the fairy creatures, and adults would just dismiss that as, oh, they're just talking to an imaginary friend and stuff like that. So then Filthy Henry's whole thing is he's a half-breed. His dad is a fairy, his mother was a human. So he can kind of stand in the pathway between the two worlds. And then it's just kind of like, what do you kind of bring in from the modern world that would make sense in the fairy world? Kind of look at it from the other way, as opposed to flipping it and bringing the fairies into the modern. So like I have fairies acting as spies in the police force, so that if they get wind of a fairy related crime, they can kind of intercept it and make sure that no humans get involved. There's the children of Lear. I made them like a whole race in the stories, so they're called Learlings, and they're humans that can turn into swans, and they're like the postal service for the fairies, and they like fly around the place all the time. But they also kind of bob up and down on the River Liffey in Dublin and just keep an eye and make sure that stuff is as it should be, and that nobody's doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. So, and then Filthy Henry himself, he doesn't have as much magic at his disposal as, say, Constantine or Dresden would. So there's limits on what he can do. So predominantly he sends fireballs flying around the place, and he tries to get out of tricky situations using con tricks and stuff like that.
I love that. I'm getting vibes of the sort of Peter Pan mythology. There's a sort of innocence that we have, that we see the world for what it is with these fairies and this mysticism all around us. And as we become older and the ego takes over, we lose these gifts, this vision.
Yeah, exactly.
Really out there.
Kind of one of the things that I have in it is creative people. So people that are like artists by trade, they still can get a glimpse, because deep down they kind of never lost touch with their inner child. So it's kind of like something out of the corner of your eye, and they turn and it's gone again. But that means they've seen a fairy or something walking past them. And then the way I explain away certain parts of it is just the human mind will fill in the blanks. So as you walk into a coffee shop and you see an empty table, but for some reason you don't want to sit there, it's because in the back of your mind, you actually know that there's fairies there, but your adult mind won't let you see them. So you kind of just go like, oh, I don't want to be here, I'm feeling uncomfortable, so I'll take my coffee to go. And then the fairies can just sit there doing whatever they want, because the humans aren't going to bother them.
That's brilliant. I love that. It must be difficult at the beginning of that process when you first started to get the ideas. You're kind of alone in your mind with these inspirations, and you want to share them to your circle of acquaintances. And they kind of course, they're your friends, are going to support you, but at the same time, they're kind of like, oh, okay. And it's not really until like you actually have this book published that they start to take you seriously. And it's off your chest by that point. You think, I can move on with my life because it's no longer in my head now. It's on paper.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, like, I would have used my wife, then girlfriend, when I was first writing the first one, to kind of bounce the ideas off. And she's great because she will be my worst critic in a constructive way. So I'd be coming in and kind of going like, I've had this great idea. Filthy Henry's going to turn into a dragon at the end of it. And she's like, why? Like, why would he do that? Like, that's not, you told me the rules. Like, that's totally against all of your rules. And I was like, yeah, but it'd be cool. And she's like, no, just don't bother with that at all. But then when
you get to have that as well, because you need that
exactly, yeah,
criticism, not like, oh, that's shit, good criticism. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, like, criticism at the end of the day is meant to be constructive. It's the individual. If you don't take it on as constructive feedback, you're the one who's actually taking it as a negative thing, whereas people are actually genuinely trying to help you. But like, it got to the stage where I was giving her drafts or chapters, and she'd have to leave the room, because as she was reading them, she might start laughing, and I'd be like, oh my God, what was that? What was that line that you just read that was funny? And she's like, I can't do this. Like, I need to be able to read it and then come back to you. But yeah, so I would use her quite a lot. And then I have a friend as well. He kind of dabbles in writing from time to time, and I'd give him kind of nearly finished drafts, maybe like the second to last finished draft. and he's very good at coming back with like critical analysis of this worked, this didn't work. Why did you try to do that? That's not something Filthy Henry would do in my mind. And I'm like, okay, well, if the person who didn't write it is saying that, then obviously I'm trying to fill in something in my head that I shouldn't have done. So I'd go back and I review it and change it around. But yeah, you need those sounding boards. It's a lonely hobby otherwise.
100%.
I've been with my girlfriend for 18 months and I'm pretty certain by the point that she is the one. And one of the key signs is that she, like you mentioned with your girlfriend, now wife, is that she too also challenges me on an intellectual level, but she does it in a way that makes me a better person for it. When I'd met her, I was about 2.5 years through my novel that I've just finished, and she straight away poked holes into it. And she told me exactly what was wrong with it. So I kept coming back. And even to this day, she'll still say, but what about this? And she brings up things I don't even think about. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. And then she's just like, just a sentence. That's all you need, just a sentence. It's great. It's great to have that person by your side, because I think there's a lot of authors out there who are world renowned, but behind them or beside them was a woman in the sidelines. That was really their biggest critic and their biggest supporter. Stephen King with Carrie, for example, he chucked it away in the early days, and his wife, I can't remember her name, begins with a T. I can't remember King's wife, but she finds it in the bin, brings it out and says, no, you need to finish this. And he eventually does, and it becomes a massive success.
Yeah.
Elmore Leonard himself said that his wife too was a massive help to his work. And it's great to hear, and I get it now.
Oh yeah, no, you absolutely need that, because like with King, like you're going to be sitting there at 2:00 in the morning and you'll be like, what have I just, and you'll just select the file and delete it and you'll walk away. And you'd be like, I've made the best decision of my life. And then, at 4:00 in the morning, you'd be like Googling how to undo deleted files because maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. Like, I actually, one of the things I hate doing at the moment is, as I'm working on Filthy Henry 5, my friend who I mentioned, he's been recording the original books as a podcast, as like a pandemic hobby for himself. He does sound engineering, and he's studying it at the moment. So I'm listening to that in the background as I'm editing my current stuff, and I'm like, man, I was funny 7 years ago. I'm pretty sure what I've just written now is not funny.
It's that old expression, isn't it? Seeing the woods from the trees.
Yeah.
When you're too close to it, there's certain things you're going to miss, and then when you come back to it, Stephen King has a book, no doubt you've come across, his memoir on writing. That was one of the first things I was advised to read when seeking advice. And he was right when he says, once you've done that first draft, you've got to walk away from it for a good 6 to 8 weeks and then come back to it, because you're looking at it with different eyes.
Yeah.
And there are some things that you thought were great that are not so great and are flawed. And there's other things that you weren't too sure about that you actually make you laugh and think, oh, actually, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I think sense of humor changes with age. As much as you hate to admit it when you're younger, you're like, oh, I'll never grow up. But you do when you get older. Your sense of humor does change a lot. Like, I still laugh at some of the stuff I laughed at when I was younger, but now I laugh at more like darker stuff than I would have when I was younger. Do you know what I mean? It's more lighthearted when you're in your early teens.
Yeah.
Get a bit older, it's a bit darker, and depending on what you go through in life. But that's my take on it.
And then the other trick as well is, like, I never really figured out what age bracket the Discworld series was meant to be targeted at, but that's the same age bracket I want to target the Filthy Henry books at. So you have to be kind of careful towing the line with something that like an adult would definitely find funny. I was like, oh, if a teenager picks this up, have I just crossed the line there or not?
Yeah.
It's interesting when you brought up about deleting certain files and thinking, how do I delete this? Although there's plenty of advice out there for aspiring writers, you do start to develop your own rules, don't you? And one of the rules I started to, or customs rather, that I come across was something I've called reusing assets. So there might be a draft I wrote that was completely horrid, but there are assets within it, whether it be characters or whether it be certain elements that can be reused and used again in a much more well thought out, articulated new draft.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought, I don't know if you'd ever come across something like that, where there's been things in a draft that you just weren't keen on, but you thought, oh, hang on a minute, if I just take these little elements and keep them, and then find a new purpose, a new role for them. Have you ever had that?
Yeah, no, I've actually, every single book I've ever written, I've had that in. So even with the one I'm currently on, I would make a folder and call it draft one, and then I just bang out all the chapters. And then when that draft is finished, when I think that's done, I start doing the edits and the reviews. I'll start new folders. I won't go over the same files, and I just copy the file from one folder to the next, and I go along. So I'm currently on draft 3 of the 5th book, and I know for a fact I've deleted like whole swaths of texts from chapters, because during draft 2 I was like, no, that's not working. It's rubbish. I don't like the idea. It's not moving the plot along. It's breaking all the rules of keep the reader engaged. And now as I hit those points in the current draft, and I fixed them up in draft 2, so it's not as jarring. It's not like I've just cut out a part of the world and left it away. I worked on it and reworked things in. But now I'm sitting there with draft 3 going, there was a joke though that probably would still work. So I go back to the original draft files and I open it back up and I try and find it and pull it back in. But I think it was book 3 where I had a whole subplot around Filthy Henry's grandfather, and he was going to like kind of meet up with him and pay respects to him, because Filthy Henry ages slower because of his half-breed nature. So he's nearly 100 years old, but he looks like a lad in his 30s. So his grandfather would actually look older than he is. And I remember kind of getting around to draft 5, and I was like, this doesn't really add anything other than a little bit of backstory to Filthy Henry. So I just got rid of it, and it never came back into the stories. But I was telling some friends of mine then in a pub after I published it about this, and they were like, it's weird. Writers will always see these versions of books that nobody else in the world will ever see, because once you publish it, you've edited all of that out, you've fixed up all that stuff. So it's almost like you're living in multiple realities all at the same time. You have to keep them all going until you get to the single focal point, and then you're like, oh, here we go, this is where I am now, and then you just get that last one out the door.
It's quite daunting when you think about it. I was saying this to Sean a couple of hours ago. There was a lot of ups and downs in the creative process. And now that I myself have just reached that finish line or thereabouts on that final draft, I go back to those a couple of years ago of procrastinating at home and saying to myself, I've got all day off work, I'm going to write. But there was some sort of, I wouldn't even go as far to call it writer's block. It was almost like subconsciously in my brain, I didn't believe in where this was going. And therefore that would kill me of any motivation. So
did you think that's first time finishing novel nerves though? It's your very first novel, isn't it? So obviously you ain't experienced them feelings before.
It's a weird one. Looking back now, I've got this whole butterfly effect going on in my head. I'm thinking any different thing, whether I didn't go to answer the door when I was typing, or whether I didn't go to such and such a place that day, what would I've written that time? It would be a completely different novel. So there's like, and you talk about all these different realities. The novel I have now, that's just one of multiple infinite amounts of novels that I would have typed up in the end. That sounds a bit, I know that sounds a bit out there, but that's how my brain was thinking. It's like, it's very daunting to think, wow, all those things had to happen over that 4-year period for me to wind up with the final product I have now.
Then
it goes back to the thing was, if you didn't do those things, would the novel still ended up the same anyway?
I don't know, because you never know what books we're going to go to pick up in search of inspiration or in search of resource.
Because it seems like we were all inspired by the same book to write our novels, Android. So it's a bit mental.
Doing a plug for a man that died 30,
pages.
40 years ago. This man died. But yeah, sorry, I was just saying, I just wanted to discuss as well, like the highs and lows of that process, because it is very, very lonely. And if you have those niggling doubts about where you're going with this story, you just think to yourself, I haven't got the motivation because I don't know what I'm doing, that writer's block. And then, but then it pays off when you get that light bulb moment. You find a subject or a direction in which to pursue where you're going with it. And then you can't stop. It doesn't stop because you have the belief in yourself again. It wasn't that I was being lazy. It wasn't that I was worthless, or that I was just didn't care. It's that I just didn't have the oomph the direction, because my brain knew this ain't going to work out like this.
Well, it's like so when I was working on the first one, I think it took me about 16 months to get it from initial first word on the page to something that I was kind of happy with. And then I started shopping it around. But while I was shopping it around, I started working on the second one. Because I kind of like that, like the momentum was there and I didn't want to lose it. So I actually have a habit now that I find it very hard to break. I have to write at least 500 words a day, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but a phrase that was said to me in my youth is little acorns grow into mighty oaks. So like if you're looking to write 60,000, 70,000 word novel and you just chip away 500 words a day at a minimum, you'll get there eventually. Some days I might be in the zone. And for example, yesterday I wrote over 2,000 words and it didn't feel like a chore. And then some days you'd be sitting there writing 499 and you're like, oh, I'll just stick in the word "de," and then that's like 500 words. And I know I'll delete it when I get back, like, but it's just to keep kind of doing that. But like, particularly with the pandemic, I have found that the lows have been getting very low in terms of the craft. So I might be kind of like editing book 5 and then I'll be like, this is absolute nonsense. The first 4 were just lucky. I'm not bothering. I'm not doing it anymore. And instead, what I've actually started doing is writing some short stories unrelated to Filthy Henry for some other little projects that I have on the go. But it can be a struggle to motivate yourself, particularly if you're not in the right frame of mind. And there's no real trick to doing it other than just to kind of do it. And a friend of mine who's trying to write a book, he keeps asking me about this process as well. Like, you know, how do you make yourself write 500 words a day? And it's kind of like, well, it's like when Jonah Hill asked Channing Tatum, how do you get ripped? Is it diet and exercise? And Channing Tatum said, yes, of course it is, you idiot. That's all you have to do. It's like the same thing, like, how do you write 500 words a day? It's like, well, you open up your laptop and you start typing and then you stop.
There's a skill at the end of the day as well. It's like a learning thing. You got to keep doing it to
get better. Just got to keep doing
it.
Exactly.
It's quite disheartening in the earlier days of the project when a lot of those 500 words are getting taken out. Like, you might be able to salvage some of those assets, as I call them, but a lot of those 500 words are going. It's not really until the very end of the process, towards the final draft, that they're, for the most part, staying in.
Yeah. So back when I was probably 15 or 16, I was convinced I was going to become a writer full time and not go into the IT industry as my day job. And I tried to write a book then, and I fell into the trap that I think probably everyone initially falls into, of I'd write a couple of words, a couple of hundred words, whatever it is. And then the next day I'd come back and I'd start editing those words because they have to be perfect before you move on to the next one.
I've done that.
And then I was reading a bunch of books. I think I actually still have them about, you know, writing and editing and all that kind of stuff.
Creative writing for dummies.
Probably
I've got
one
that
of those.
book right here. Look, hold on. I don't know why I've still got it. It's just massive.
It's a good bookend.
Yeah.
But one of them had a line in it where they just said, whatever you're going to write, you're going to chop out anyway. So just get through the first draft. You know, never look back unless you need to remind yourself of where you were. But you're not allowed to edit anything until draft 2. And that's then what I did. Like, I know full well that I'm probably going to cut a third of what's in book 5 at the minute. I don't mind that. You know, it was good at the time. It might not be good at the end, but like you were saying, the book that comes out at the end is based off all those decisions that you make along the way. And it's just, you just have to know yourself that not every single word has to be perfect the first time it comes out.
Yeah, my first draft only took 4 months 5 months to write up. And, well, I'd done it pen longhand, and then I typed it all up when I got home in the UK. And I thought I was on top of the moon when I'd finished this first draft. It's really lame now. It was only 33,000 words long, but it was the first draft I'd ever completed in my life.
Yeah.
And this is make you laugh. I typed it in Courier font. Thinking that was the industry standard. And I remember just
make mistakes, bro.
I just remember I was only 25 at the time. Right? I'm 29 now, but I was elated. I thought, yes, I've done it. I've got my first draft. I'll have this done in the next few months, 4 years later. And I forget where I was going with this, but even then I was very meticulous over that first draft, and I just facepalm now because a lot of that first draft never made it. A lot of the assets got reused, but it's completely different book now.
Yeah, yeah. And what is the book about? Are you able to say before you start shopping it around?
Yeah. I'll give you the 30-second synopsis because I don't wish to be too self-indulgent. It's called Fauville, which is French for fake city, and it's a psychological thriller / sci-fi about an amnesiac war veteran struggling to adapt to civilian life. And while he's suffering through his PTSD, he soon comes across an old comrade from the war days who tells him that this war's not over, and there's information in his head that the enemy are trying to get to. That's why they're trying to get his memory back.
Very good.
And that's sort of established in the opening 3 chapters.
That's a good elevator pitch that you have there.
Yeah. And one of my biggest inspirations these days is Elmore Leonard. Big fan of Elmore Leonard. He wrote Get Shorty.
Yes.
Which became the genre. Are you familiar with the author?
I am. I have Get Shorty, and I had to follow up Be Cool.
Be Cool. I haven't read Be Cool, but my favorite one is Rum Punch, which got made into a Quentin Tarantino movie, Jackie Brown.
Yes. Yeah.
And what I love about Elmore Leonard is his brevity, is dialogue driven, and it's very kinetic. His style, it doesn't stop, it doesn't hang around, it doesn't over emphasize on too much detail, and the details that are in and around the dialogue are so concise that it just flows. Every word punches. He does have his weaknesses. He can be a bit meandering because I don't think he really has too much plot going on. He just kind of lets the characters figure out for themselves. But mine was very plot driven, even though there's a lot of nonsensical, idiosyncratic conversations going on. But that was one of my biggest inspirations, was that concise brevity style. Hence why it's only 55,000 words long.
But like, we're living in a world where people like their content short. It's Twitter is 280 characters. I don't use it, but TikTok is like whatever it is, 60 seconds. Instagram is flick. So short reads are quite popular at the moment, particularly when it comes to if we ever get back to it, commuters, because they love to be able to read a book in a week, and if they can get short ones, then all the better. It's the long ones I find it struggling, I think, these days to get somebody to actually pick them up. Yeah.
And much like yourself, I took a fascination in real subjects because even though I'm no longer a big fan of science fiction now as I was when I was 19. I've sort of gone more into situational kind of driven stories, character driven, situational based. But this one happens to be science fiction anyway, because of some of the elements in it. And I took real inspiration from a man named Ray Kurzweil, who wrote a book called The Singularity is Near. And it talks about this hypothetical future. It's prophesizing this. He's a futurist, and he talks about the merger of human and machine intelligence into the next epoch of our transcendence, basically. And it was always interesting. So I've got this little, what I call my blue book of knowledge, and it was a very grueling process of just reading the book and writing down paragraphs that were useful because it's nonfiction. And it was grueling. It was awful, but it became helpful later down the line. The research that goes with it, no doubt you had to do it, even though you're very well versed on the Celtic lore anyway. I'm sure you had to take a lot of notes to refer to when intertwining it into the novel that you'd created.
Oh no, absolutely. Like I have an Evernote file that I would put down kind of stuff that I found interesting from the actual stories or stuff that I needed to work in. Spelling is a big one as well, because I can never remember half the Irish spellings for things. So it's often easier to just have it somewhere you can just copy and paste it in. So my buddy who read the first draft of book 5 said, the same character's name has changed like 50 times in the book. And I was like, yeah, but you knew who it was, so that's okay. I'll fix it up afterwards and I can go in. But then there's like little things you'll stumble across. Like I remember writing a story about Stonehenge, and I read a fact and I was like, well, I didn't actually know that about Stonehenge. So straight away it has to go into the note file because I'm going to use it later on then as something to work in. So yeah, you have to do that. If you don't do that, you just end up going crazy trying to remember all this stuff. And it's like, no, that's never going to work.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful that we live in this technological era now where we have so many resources available. If we look for it, we will find it.
Yeah.
And knowing what you don't know is half the battle. And that's always been one of the main motivators for me when writing. I'm trying to think, I don't know the subject, so where can I find the material for that? You don't have to be a professor or a genius in it, but you just have to have some kind of competency in the subject, even if it is real factual based knowledge. And it's such a thrill when you find that book on Amazon that is ideal in learning from it, or the YouTube video or the documentary that gives you what you need to know. And then you come away from it like, I am buzzed. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I have what I need.
Especially if you're going to write something based on fact and you make it up, you've got to have the knowledge there.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've written one science fiction novel, and there's an element of time travel in it. And I wanted to kind of use theories that are currently out there. So like I was on Wikipedia one night for like 2 hours, and it was kind of like, just read the article, click the link, read the article, click the next link, read the article, click the next link. And I ended up like kind of building up this odd framework of like information. And it's like, I know all of this is theoretical, but I had some pretty graphs and things that I can kind of understand. So if I can get all that now condensed into a paragraph, it'll fit nicely into the book and explain away something for me, and give it a little bit more believability, I suppose, is the way you're looking at it. But it's tricky.
When it comes to time travel, I think one show has perfected it, and it was Lost. I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah. I can't, like, my rules of time travel go by their rules. I can't
really
change them. Yeah. Like, it seems so perfect. I don't want to, because if I explain it, me and Dan are going to do a series where we go through Lost and watch it, but yeah, their rules of time travel were perfect in my opinion.
I wasn't mad on their rules.
No?
In fact, for my own one,
don't spoil it. I haven't seen Lost. I haven't seen Lost.
I'm not going to say anything. But for my own book, the rules were fairly set in stone in that essentially what happens in the story is there's a machine that allows you to make a temporal copy of yourself from 1 second in the future. And it was specifically 1 second, so that there was no future knowledge, and there's also no way for you to influence the future by pulling somebody like a couple of minutes or a couple of days in. And I kind of based it all on the mutable universe, and then the Avengers Endgame has it as well, where if you travel into the past, that's your current future, so you can't actually do anything to change it, because it's the bootstrap paradox, the grandfather paradox. You can't go back and kill Hitler, because, well, then why did you go back in the first place if you killed Hitler? That kind of thing. And it's like, it's gas. You can really go down a rabbit hole on Wikipedia when you're reading all these things. It's like, yeah, but what? Oh, there's an article on that one. Okay, I'm going to read that article now. And then you're like, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. You're like, I've got to get the kids up for school in the morning. I've got to go to bed.
I've got a future project that I'll be working with that will be based on time travel, but I'm going to purposefully brush over the time travel element. Like, the plot device of the time travel will be destroyed very early on in the novel and trap that character in that era of the 1990s.
Oh, very
so
cool.
That's could be my way of brushing over it, where it's like, it doesn't matter now, he's stuck there.
Yeah.
And it will be based on the grandfather paradox, where it will be a case of cause and effect. And I do find it fascinating. One of my favorite time travel novels, it's not even science fiction, it's more fantasy. It's called Replay by Ken Grimwood. Have you heard of this?
No.
It was published in 1988, and Ken Grimwood is a beautiful writer. He sadly passed away in 2003. He was quite obscure, even though he was well known by his fans. It's hard to explain. And he wrote a book about a man named Jeff who dies in 1988, very early on in the book, and wakes up 18 years of age in 1963 with all the knowledge retained from the last 25 years. And then that first cycle, he starts putting on outlandish bets on like the Triple Crown, becomes a millionaire, starts investing in Apple, but then dies again in 1988 and wakes up again at 18 years of age.
With even more knowledge now in his head.
Yeah.
It's like Groundhog Day.
Well,
similar.
This came out 5 years before Groundhog Day. And I only came across the novel because I'd watched Groundhog Day, and me being the way I am, I Wikipedia Groundhog Day, because I just like reading about films after I've watched them.
Yeah.
And it mentioned Replay, and I thought, I'm going to check this out. And it's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful
book.
Check it out. And ironically, I don't know if this is a good use of the word ironic, but Ken Grimwood died of a heart attack himself whilst writing the sequel to the novel.
That's a bit. It is a bit ironic. Yeah. Did he wake up when he was 18?
I don't know. Maybe he's gone back in time and
he's rewriting.
Yeah, I highly recommend. And it's obviously defined. It's part of the SF Fantasy Masterworks. It's part of the Fantasy Masterworks. So it's not sci-fi Masterworks, because there's no real explanation to his time travel abilities. It just happens.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I still think that would count as fantasy, wouldn't it?
It does. I think the sci-fi pick comes from there's a machine. That seems to be the delineation. Like, if you
the numbers beforehand.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like the Anne McCaffrey and the Pern books. Like, I would have thought that they were fantasy because they're all about dragons. But it's actually on an alien world, and there's time travel in it, and the time travel is done because of a machine. So Pern technically counts as science fiction, even though like they're riding on dragons.
It's like a Double Star. You ever read that?
No.
It's in the SF Masterworks, but it's just an actor pretending to be a president on a different planet. It's the only science fiction is the rocket flying them there. But it's one of my favorite books, though. So technically, it's science fiction, but
so Double Star and Replay. I have to add the two of these to my list.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Replay's a beautiful book. My favorite book, though, of all time is Flowers for Algernon. Daniel Keyes. I myself, I'm on the spectrum with Asperger's. It's not that noticeable. I've kind of got a grasp of it in my adulthood, but I really identify with the character of Charlie Gordon, where he himself has an IQ of like 68 at the beginning of the book. You've not read this book before, Sean, but it's written in the first person as a diary, and it's illiterate. But obviously, the way you can write illiterately, is that even a real word? That Oxford reading test, isn't it? As long as the last and first letter are the same, your brain should be able to decipher it.
Yeah.
So even though the writing's all jumbled up with no punctuation, he himself is saying he's part of an experiment and they're going to try and make him smart. And then he progressively becomes smarter and smarter, and his punctuation in the diary improves. And he becomes this genius, more genius than the people that got him there in the first place. But then he starts to regress. And it's a harrowing story. But it's brilliant. Brilliant.
It's actually really dope.
It's a great book. And my favorite Philip K. Dick novel has to be A Scanner Darkly.
Oh, it's a good one. That's a good pick.
I mean, you can tell
we're going to get into controversial Philip K. Dick novels, are we?
No, it's okay. It's okay for him to be wrong, because it has to be. It has to be Android, but like, it's okay to be wrong.
Android is great.
I always say that, man.
That was my first exposure to Philip K. Dick. So I made the number one sin as an aspiring writer at 18 years of age. I didn't read, even though I could read. I didn't do it in my free time, and I decided I need to start reading. And I watched Blade Runner because I love that film. And it was one of those films where I watched it at the age of 17. And I didn't understand the hype, because this was a couple of years after the final cut had been released.
Oh, yeah.
And I was doing media studies at college, and I could see the poster just being blown up everywhere. I'm thinking, what is this Blade Runner? So I finally buy it in Tesco's and I watch it. And by the end of it, I'm scratching my head thinking, I don't get it. What was the hype? And then I watched it again 6 months later. And then that Tears and Rain bit got to me. I was like, oh, wow, that was quite profound. And then I watch it again 2 years later, and I'm noticing more and more profound atmospheric ambience going on around me. And then that's when I realized about the soundtrack. So next thing you know, the credits roll based on Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. And I'm like, well, I'm going to buy it. And immediately I loved the book. Loved it. I loved especially, and there's massive differences between the two things, but they're great in their own right. I loved the J.R. Isidore character and his empathy box.
Yes.
I thought that was a brilliant device in the film. That and the mood organ, even though the mood organ itself is not really touched on that much, that seemed like that was Philip K. Dick's criticism of the pharmaceutical industry, where you could just dial something. There was a little joke in Androids in the first chapter when Deckard's wife, Iran, I think her name is, she is laying in bed feeling all depressed and apathetic because the world around them is just awful. And she's like, I don't feel like doing anything today. I don't feel like dialing anything in the mood organ. And he says, well, then dial 65 or something like that. And he goes, well, how can I dial something if I don't want to dial something?
Yeah. and then doesn't he suggest, I can't remember the numbers, but he suggests something along the lines of happiness, but with also an understanding that your husband means you well. And she's like, if you dial that, I'm going to dial something else. And basically it's like, wife up to level 12 of anger.
Yeah. When did you watch the film before reading the book, or was it the way around?
It would have been the other way around. I would have read the book before the films.
Well, funny enough, because the book has such a distinctive identity compared to the film, I didn't see Harrison Ford as Rick Deckard. I saw Philip K. Dick in the Harrison Ford outfit because I could feel his voice.
Oh, that's it's good. There was a lot about the book though that I thought they could have brought over. But then the movie in its own way, you can almost have it as a standalone. Like in the book, he's a rookie. He hasn't done anything before. And then there was the whole replicant police force angle as well that they never even touched on in the movie. But then there's the age-old debate about the movie: is he a replicant at the end or not? And it all depends on which version of the cut that you see. And they never even answered that in the 2049 follow-up.
Do you know?
I think everyone's biggest theory is when he dreams about the unicorn in it and the origami when the guy leaves the origami.
Yeah,
but I think the biggest crime, the film, love it, but the relationship with his android sheep, that is the biggest sin to me.
That has to go into it.
That has to have it.
That is devastating.
That's my only criticism with Blade Runner. Really,
yeah.
I am going to be spoiling a novel that's been around for 50 years, but I am devastated when his goat is killed by Rachel.
Oh,
because he worked so hard to get that goat.
Yeah, man. That's what I mean, yeah.
And then the frog that he gets at the end, and he's so happy with life. It's like...
Well, again, I was only 19 when I read this book. I was so disappointed by the ending because but that's because, again, it was my first exposure to Philip K. Dick. So that became a custom after multiple books. I was like, oh, well, the typical K. Dick.
Yeah.
Never going to get a sequel because the man's been dead for years, you know what I mean? But here's an interesting bit of trivia for you. You might be aware of this, you might not be, but obviously with the final cut, there's another disc that comes with it. That's the making of Dangerous Days, I think they call it, the making of Blade Runner. And it's longer than the film itself, and it is a great documentary of all the people still alive discussing the making of the movie. And they go over Hampton France's original draft of the Blade Runner script. And the opening scene consisted of an android living in a hut in the middle of the desert with a boiling pot going, and it showed you all the storyboards of the Blade Runner coming in and killing them. And I was really, when I first watched 2049, the sequel, that was the opening shot of that one.
That's
because
right,
they brought Hampton Francer back on. I think I'm saying his name right. They brought him back on to write the script for the second movie, and I was glad to see that in there. I was like, that's nice to see. Because
that's a nice touch.
Not David Prowse. What was the other guy's name?
Peoples.
David Peoples. He was the second writer. He was the one that rewrote they got rid of Hampton Francer in the first film, and then brought in David Peoples, who also went on to write Soldier with Kurt Russell, which is like a side sequel.
I think I've seen Soldier, only the once though.
Yeah, I haven't heard good things about it, but I heard it is in the Blade Runner universe.
I've seen Soldier advertised yesterday. That's crazy.
Yeah, what a coincidence. But another good Philip K. Dick novel, it was Ubik. I really liked that book.
Ubik was good.
Flow My Tears, the policeman said.
I haven't seen
that's
that.
One of my favorites.
Heard good things though.
That one's actually that's an interesting
underrated.
One. It is underrated. It's like, I think that one, and is it Valis, which is
Valis? Yeah, that's good as well.
You kind of read Valis, and then you read the back of Valis, and it's like, this was Philip K. Dick because he thought he saw God as a laser, and he had a book idea. It's like, wow, my ideas come from places of not LSD.
Eating ready to eat in the morning. Oh yeah, shit.
That makes me. I've just thought of a question that was in my head earlier. When it comes to the creation process, do you hear sometimes people talk about how characters talk to them? Do you ever experience that? Because I've never really had that. I see it as a sort of like I'm a fly on the wall. I see it unfold as a sort of scenario, but I never actually have characters talk to me.
So it's funny. Yeah, that's a funny one to ask. I would write a Filthy Henry book quicker than I'd write anything else. Now, I've only ever really took a stab at the sci-fi book, Duplex Tempus, and that took about 2 years to kind of get out the door, whereas a Filthy Henry one would take maybe a year and a half, if not less. My friend who's doing the podcast version of the book, we have the first book up already on Spotify and all that as like season 1. So season 2 is the second book. And around April Fools, he just sends me a message and he goes, I need you to write something as if Filthy Henry says it, because we're going to advertise season 2 coming out on April 18th. And I was like, yeah, cool. And like in 5 minutes, I had something sent over to him, and he goes, wow, like that was pretty quick. And it's like, it's totally something Filthy Henry would say. And it's kind of like Filthy Henry wears a trench coat in the books. So it's kind of like, almost, if I need to write something about Filthy Henry, I just mentally put on the trench coat and I'm Filthy Henry. And I can hear him in my head straight away. So it's like he is the voice in my head all the time when I'm doing this type of stuff. So he's definitely the easier of the things for me to write.
That's really cool. I tend to just think up weird scenarios and just try and build on them. Towards the end of my book, I'm not giving anything away here, but I implemented some stories within stories, a character telling a story.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them consisted of a guy in Manchester in 1991. He comes across this girl at a Happy Mondays gig, and they walk back to her house, and they're really high on MDMA by this point, and she invites him in, and because of the MDMA, he starts losing his wood. So he decides that by taking her bra off and seeing her boobs will get him horny again.
Right.
But because of the build up to this little short story was that these particular bras in 1991 were defective, as a sort of, because it was a response to the heroin chic trend that had been coming up, and the people behind these clothes were so disgusted by the heroin chic that they rushed out their own version that would be more accommodating to plus size women, but it was rushed, so therefore the bra was defective. So this guy's really struggling to undo the 3-tier hook system. And she's like, just leave it. It's like, no, I've got this. And every time he starts trying to twiddle with one hook, he starts thinking back, because he turns out he's a bank robber, and he starts thinking back to previous heists, because that gets him hard, thinking back to them.
So he's like cracking the safe.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes off in italics. Yeah, because every short story has the same sort of suggestion that he's very good with his hands. Right. And it changes into the present tense in italics when he's thinking, he goes off on a tangent about this heist, and then by the end of that heist he's undone a bra hook, and then he gets to the second bra hook and it goes off into another tangent, and by the third bra hook the woman's like, I've totally lost it now, and he just looks down at his hands and looks at the bra catch in his hands, and it just says Gold Vault Dubai 9-man operation, and that's the end of the story.
Hey, it's a good plot device.
You know what I mean? It was just a little silly 5-page short story within a story.
Yeah.
Because there was a little mannequin with a bra on it, and the woman's like, what's the story behind this bra? And he was like, I'll tell you. But I just love situations. I thought, a bank robber who can't undo bra. That was the premise.
That's a good one. It's very good.
And the short story was called Over the Shoulder Boulder Holder.
Boulder holder.
I thank my mother for that title. She told me about that one.
Yeah, you have to credit her in the book somewhere.
Yeah, I will. But I just love like little silly scenarios that come to me, and I just think, I like that. You know, these random thoughts that we get is, you know, I don't want to be stuck with them. I want to put them on paper and get it off my chest.
Yeah.
And then share it with friends, maybe, so that we can have a little giggle about it, because I like to explore ideas, even if there's merit to it. But even if there's no merit to it, it doesn't matter. It's still funny.
Yeah.
To get those.
I think that's the best way. Yeah. And that's how I open my story, with a bit of sense of humor. Like, they're all sitting around a poker table, and that's how you get to know the characters. Going through them one by one, playing their hands. So you get to know their personalities as they're playing the poker game. It's chapter 1, pretty much.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because for years I was struggling with, how do I start this? How do I get the characters? How do you introduce the characters without being in your face? You know, like, you know, you read a novel and it's like, Martin has 2 bright red eyes, and you're like, yeah, okay, get to the point. You know what I mean? So way, they're all introduced at once. Bam, you know who they are.
One of the things I've done, particularly with the Filthy Henrys, I don't really overly describe the characters. I leave that entirely up to the reader to put them into their head. So like, Filthy Henry has a full-on description, and so does one other character in it. But the reason the second character got a full description is because there's comedic value to him being bald with a bit pot belly, and because Filthy Henry then uses that as like an insult to him later on. But most everybody else, they might get like, you know, they're tall and dark, but they don't get like the description of their hair or anything like that.
Yeah.
Unless it's actually going to move the plot forward. I did the same then with the sci-fi one. Like I didn't describe anybody in the sci-fi one, I don't think, beyond one of the main characters, and only because he needed to come across as like a weakling. So he needed to have a frail body, and he needed to be like kind of doubled over, and no woman's going to be interested in him. But other than that, it's pure just this is the character, and these are the traits. The traits are the more important thing for you to know.
No, that's it exactly. Yeah, and the traits and the personality speak volumes more than a description, I think.
Yeah, totally, absolutely.
That's one of the cool things about writing. I always think about the film Inception and the hidden meaning behind Inception. The fact that the film itself is about the creative process of making a movie or creating a story. You are essentially, with a novel, creating an illusion, and you have to abide by certain, well, not so much rules, but certain customs in order to maintain that illusion, so no one realizes that they're reading a story. And that's what we're doing. It's like a magic trick. It's not really magic, but we're trying to create the illusion that this is real.
Yeah, totally.
And that's what Inception is. They're trying to keep the dreamer thinking that this is what it is. Once they start to question it, the whole thing crumbles.
The whole thing falls apart.
And I always find that, it's all well and good, like I said earlier, learning these things from well-established authors, whether it be Stephen King or Chuck Palahniuk or whoever it may be. These another good book I come across, which I found very valuable, was E.B. White and John Schrunk, Elements of Style. It's only 90 pages long, but it really covers a lot that I found useful, especially when it comes to punctuation, understanding the use of punctuation. And I forgot where I was going with this now. As it's all well and good getting those rules from well-established people, but you kind of figure out your own rules as you go along, because Neil deGrasse Tyson says it himself: first learn the rules, then distort them at your leisure.
Yeah. I think sometimes though you'll find writers, and I mean established ones, might take that a little bit too far to a certain degree. Like I remember reading the first Wheel of Time book way back when it first came out. Like I think it was like 2 weeks out the door, and it was like light on description, heavy on plot. Amazing, brilliant, can't wait for the next one. And the next one came out and it's pretty much the same thing again. And then by the third one, it was like, there's a lot of description going on here. Like you've spent a lot of time describing a field of grass. Like grass is green, dude. Just move on. I don't need to hear about the blades all being at a northerly angle because of the wind from something else. And then by the time the fifth or sixth one came along, I was like, I'm done with this series. There's too much description. You're not painting me a picture. You're meant to be painting me a word picture.
Yeah, there was one book that people kept recommending to me, especially older people, because I work at a gym as a PT, so I interact with a lot of older people. And one guy kept telling me to read Raymond Chandler, and his most famous book is called The Big Sleep. He's sort of not so much the founder, but he was one of the first within that hard-boiled detective noir genre. And I tried reading The Big Sleep, and within 2 chapters, I just had to throw it away, because everything was like this, like that. Everything was similes, and similes drive me nuts. I'm more of a metaphor guy, and even then, I don't use that many descriptions. But again, it will be predominantly metaphor based rather than similes. I hate similes, or the overuse of similes.
Yeah.
Because everything was like. I said, don't tell me what, because not everything ages well. So you need things to be timeless. So I wasn't born in the 1930s, so I don't know what 1930 suburbia was like, or suburban life was like. So I'm saying like myself now. But that was just one of my pet peeves. But I suppose we've got our own pet peeves, and I'm curious to know what yours are.
In terms of like books and stuff.
Yeah, literature.
Yeah, so it's kind of, I do enjoy plots that are quite quick. Like I think there's definitely authors out there who manage to pack as much into a 300-page novel as someone who's written an entire series. One of the big pet peeves I would have though is, and again, it's Robert Jordan, and as far as I'm concerned, his protege George R. Martin, and now George R. Martin's protege, which is his 2 PAs, and I can't remember the pen name that they use, but they're the authors behind the Expanse series. Like,
okay.
Write your story from beginning to end. Don't pad it. you know. The original Song of Ice and Fire was a trilogy, and here we are now, 8 years later, waiting for book 6 of a show that's ended 2 years ago and wasn't well received because nobody knew how it was going to end, because
he's defo changing the ending. He's
totally changed the ending.
He's changing that ending.
And then I remember seeing a picture of him, and I was like, that dude's going to die before he finishes that. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
I think he's finished it. I think he's just waiting for the right time. Wait till people don't hate.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think if it takes you that long to get a book out the door, like his editors and his publishers are constantly putting up news articles where they're complaining about now as well. He's just really dragging his heels. And it was
same thing. Is it the Hobbit? It was a book, and then they made it into a trilogy.
Yeah, don't pad it. Stop padding it. It was perfect as 300 pages. Why did they add in all that they added in? But then it's the same with Robert Jordan. Like, he died before the end of the Wheel of Time. And supposedly he had the last book completely and utterly written in his notes. So when they brought in, what was his name? Donaldson, I think, or Sanderson. They brought in Sanderson to finish it. All he had to do was take up a notebook and turn that into a book. And instead he was like halfway through the first draft and he goes, oh, there's like 3 books here, so I'm going to write a trilogy to wrap up the story. And it's like the book series was already 15 books at that stage. You know, I just want to know, did he do it at the end? Did he save the Wheel of Time? I stopped reading that series. Like, I just couldn't be bothered with it. So that's kind of my big pet peeve, when you can kind of tell that an author is just padding just to drag a story out, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And it's kind of one of the rules that I keep with my own writing. If I feel a section of the book is it's filler, it's not moving the plot along, at the end of a paragraph, if you don't know the direction I'm going in, then it needs to go. It needs to be chopped out, because your time is valuable. And I need you to finish my book. And not like you just said, like, 2 chapters in going, no, this is not for me.
Yeah, I ran out of steam towards the end of the second act because I don't want to give too much of the twist away, but there's the true protagonist of the story is revealed towards the end. So the characters you think it's based on, their arcs finished by the second act.
Oh, okay.
And so I was thinking, oh no. And it took me 6 months to figure out the third act. And that's why I used the element of those short stories. I was watching an episode of Black Mirror. I'm a big fan of Black Mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an episode called Black Museum, which is episode 6 of series 4. And it consists of a woman going up to an almost derelict museum in the middle of the desert. And this girl comes along into this museum, and it consists of items, technology-based items. And the guy who owns it, the proprietor, whatever you call him, he tells the stories behind those items. And that was it. I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a museum within a museum where the owner is like, come along, let me so that was my way of padding it without padding it, because it really engaged me. I thought, oh, these are actually some funny. One of them was about a digital doorbell, the ones you get at the door these days, the rings. And I came up with a short story based on that doorbell, but it was too clever for its own good and got a bit possessive of the young lady who was all by herself. And the doorbell was like, you should get more you should get security cameras installed around the house so I can better protect I'm paraphrasing. Yeah. But you know what I mean? And she's like, okay. And the doorbell wears her down. And next thing you know, she meets someone down the road and all that, and the doorbell don't like it. But she can't get out of the contract because she was part of a trial period. So if she opts out too early, she has to pay the full bill. So it's like, I can wait 6 weeks. And the next thing you know, the fella down the road is getting arrested. He's been framed for something he didn't do. And the girl tries to break out the house to go out and help him. And the doorbell puts the house into full lockdown. And then the ding dong, that's the name of the short story, Ding Dong. And the ding dong representatives come along, see the house in full lockdown, get into it, and she's there dead with a candlestick in her hand. Jesus. And that was one of the short stories called Ding Dong. That comes before Over the Shoulder Boulder Holder.
that's not so much padding as it is entertaining.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought, if I'm going to pad this out, I want it to be funny, because that bra story will eventually introduce that time travel story that I mentioned earlier. He himself is the time traveler, but he gets stuck in the 90s and gets addicted to MDMA because he's engaged in stock market manipulation. but ends up getting really into Happy Mondays and the rave culture. In that brass story, I thought, well, if I'm going to introduce this character later, I might as well think of a situation. But you know what I mean? Yeah. So unnecessary padding. There's no need for it. That's why I don't really get on with most American TV shows, because they have that formula of 22 episodes a season. Whereas in the UK, we generally have, for the most part, 6 episodes a season. And you can pretty much get a good story in 6 hours or 3 hours, depending on how long the episode is. I had a girlfriend once who was really into Prison Break. And she says, we need to watch Prison Break. I'm like, okay, whatever. And I'm watching it. And after episode 1, I was like, wow, I'm into this. But as it goes and keeps going along, every other episode would be a side story of someone else, some other character.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, Jesus Christ. And then after episode 22, spoiler alert, they break out of prison. And I just stopped watching after that. I thought, I don't need to see anymore. All right, they got out of prison, hooray.
Yeah.
And the most recent frustration I had, and now that I'm getting older, I'm becoming a bit like my dad, and I love my dad.
Another spoiler, they go back in prison.
Yeah, I'm not watching it. I'm out. In my head, it ends after season 1, right? And I'm becoming a bit like my dad, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But I'm starting to lose patience. I start to get overly agitated when I'm getting strung along by a TV show. And the last time this happened was The Haunting of Hill House. My girlfriend, my current girlfriend, she was like, we got to watch The Haunting of Hill House. And it was really good as far as psychological horrors go. It's on Netflix. I really recommend it. Well, actually, I don't recommend it. But I was really getting into it. But then there was like this mid-season slog. And we just weren't getting any answers. And it was frustrating. And then by the end, you kind of get answers. But I was like, you could have done that in 6 episodes, not 10. Come on.
It's actually kind of why I enjoy, like, I remember hearing somebody describe, like, we're in the golden age of TV. It was around when Game of Thrones was on, but it was like, it's because the likes of HBO and then Netflix are making shows that are 6, 8, 14 episodes long. The days of the 22 episode seasons are gone, it seems. Because I used to absolutely hate when you'd sit down back when it was like scheduled programming. And if you didn't see this episode, you weren't going to see it again until it came out on tape. I used to hate when it was a clip show. I was like, whoa, hold on a second. Why am I fucking sitting down here for the next half an hour to watch clips from episodes I've already watched, loosely tied around? Like, Friends was notoriously bad for that. Every season of Friends had a clip show. And they'd be like, you know, the 3 guys are sitting in the apartment and they're like, hey, remember that time we all went for beers? And then it's like, you know, 15 shots from previous episodes of all the funny things. And it's like, what did this move on the story at all? The only thing Friends did to redeem themselves in my eye was they did a clip show where the clips were actually new footage that they filmed specifically for the clip show. I think they were getting a bit of flack
when they were younger or in the promo.
Yeah,
oh, no, there's been too many.
But like Scrubs did it as well. Scrubs took the mickey out of that old culture of having clip shows. I think they did a clip show which it literally lasted like 5 seconds, and somebody slaps JD across the head and goes, "Stop reminiscing." And it's like I used to just hate clip shows altogether. But yeah,
I think the only exception really because there was one exception to the 22 episode format, which was 24, and they had 24 episodes a season. And although I never finished the whole season, what I watched of 24 I really enjoyed, because I thought, what a really clever premise that every episode is 1 hour.
Yeah, no, my brother was a big fan of 24, and hilariously, didn't they do a revival of that there last year, the year before?
They did a 5th season, but I don't know how that went.
I think he said that the revival one suffered from the padding. It's like all the writers that wrote the original series didn't all come back, and they were kind of like, oh, we've only really got 12 hours. Will we call it 12? Like, no, it has to be 24. It's like, oh, okay, fine. We'll stick in 12 episodes that make no sense and just slow everything down. Okay, grand, job done. Pat on the back for everybody.
Yeah, no, it was very clever. And I liked hearing some of the little trivia I'm not a massive fan of the show. I did enjoy it, but I really admire the premise. I heard facts like the actors would have to have their hair cut every 3 days or something like that.
To keep it, yeah, I heard that too.
Maintain the continuity. And yeah, I mean, how busy is one person's day? Could you imagine a 24 series based on a writer? just one episode of aggressive masturbating. Trying to find your favorite porn video that's been deleted.
or just thinking back to the last episode of Friends, because apparently that's fucking worked for some people.
Just that one episode dedicated to watching YouTube videos and eating chocolate. And that clock's going, dude.
Oh, good Lord. Good
there
God.
we go. We're trademarking that 24 based on a writer's life. Oh man, sorry. Anyway, it's getting on a little bit. Before we finish up, I just wanted to ask, what is your favorite movie?
Hilariously, it's not Blade Runner. Despite the fact that my book. My favorite movie is The Usual Suspects.
I had that spoiled because of Scary Movie. So if I ever tragically suffer any form of brain damage or when I get older and become senile, I'll be sure to watch that film.
Yeah, well, to be honest, you could watch it now. Like there's even with a spoiler of it, I remember suggesting to my now wife that she should watch it, but I made her watch it twice, and she's like, "Why are we watching it a second time? Like we only watched it 2 weeks ago." And I was like, "Yeah, but when you see it the first time, like with no idea of the story, it's a great story. But when you watch it the second time, knowing how it ends, suddenly you see an entirely different movie because you've all these like clues and hints and things that you're watching, and then you're like, oh yeah." And then I was like, then we have to watch it a third time. She'd never done that. But like I've watched it like at least 12 times, and I still would see different bits. It's annoying me that Kevin Spacey ended up being a bit of an asshat in reality. Yeah. But then like I like to say to people, like, you can often like what they make and not like the person. So that's how I kind of justify it still being my favorite movie.
I get you. Yeah, sometimes you can separate the artist from the art. Yeah, for sure. And whether the allegations of Kevin Spacey are true or not, it's still true that he was a massive bellend in ways he treated people. John Brefnell came out and said, when they worked in theatre, he was a bit of a up himself and was very rude to people.
And didn't he also? He was on. Wasn't he in Baby Driver with him as well? He had a small role in Baby Driver. Yeah, that's why he brought him up. Yeah, and he said he just rubbed them up the wrong way. That's what John Brefnell said. I can't pronounce his name right. But I think you're doing a better job than I would have.
He did say, I don't wish to pile on, because this was around the 2017 Me Too movement thing, and John was saying, look, I don't want to be the guy to add on to it, but I will say that he was very rude.
Yeah.
But but yeah, he was a great actor. I mean, Seven's another good one.
Seven's a fantastic one, actually. Yeah.
And this is not Kevin Spacey related, but it's David Fincher related. Fight Club. Probably one of my favorite twists in movie history. I was 14 when I first watched it. I was blown away. I was like, I did not expect that.
Yeah, that's well written.
And it's actually one of the few occasions where the film's better than the book, I would say. And even Chuck Palahniuk has said that himself.
Yeah. But again, like it's the medium. He had the medium to do it in. It's very hard to do that successfully in a book.
Yeah, yeah. And his style is so bizarre. I get along with it, but it's hard to believe that he's a best-selling author with that kind of style. Because it really is like it's almost like he wrote it first draft, even though I know he puts a lot of thought and effort into it.
Yeah,
it's just kind of like he said this and he said that, and there's a lot of second tense. I'm not a big fan of the second tense for some reason. I don't let myself do it.
No, I'd be the same. I'd avoid it. But then, like, I remember reading. I don't know if you ever read anything by Roddy Doyle.
No.
The Commitments is one of his ones.
I've seen the film, but I ain't read the book.
So I remember I've seen the film, loved the film, and then I was like, I'm going to read. It's called the Barrettstown. I think it's the Barrettstown trilogy, and it's the Commitments, the Snapper, and the Van, which were all made into movies, are all in this book. So I picked it up. It's like a massive omnibus, and he doesn't use punctuation. So when his characters are talking, there's no quotation marks around it. Instead, there's he has an underscore just before the words would begin. And then to tell you that a new character is talking, he does a double underscore. So if there's no kind of, if somebody says something and then we get into a descriptive paragraph, it's easy to see who said something and then we've moved on. But if it's like two people talking back and forth, you kind of have to pay attention to how many underscores to figure out who's saying what. Because he doesn't say, there's no like, he said, she said, or anything like that. It's just underscore, double underscore, underscore, double underscore. And I was like, how did this get into a book?
Yeah.
Like, this is allowed.
I mean, I will sometimes use, I think it's called free indirect discourse, where there are no quotation marks with the speech, but that's more just to streamline certain exposition talk. So I can't explain how it's done. He said that blah 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 blah, and then saying, you know, I mean, just to really breeze through clunky exposition or dialogue bits, just to breeze through it. Is that in indirect discourse, or is that direct? I can't remember. I'm not very good with terminology.
I couldn't tell you.
I picked it up from Elmore Leonard, but yeah, there are certain books that I don't understand got made. Like one book that's a lot of people seem to love that I've read it and completed it, but I don't like it, is Neuromancer by William Gibson.
Yeah, someone recommended it to me before, and then I was immediately told afterwards when they left the room not to bother.
That's when you know it's a good book.
Yeah.
I understand the cultural phenomenon of it. People say it is the birth of cyberpunk, even though, let's be realistic, Alfred Bester was the founder of cyberpunk. He did The Star's My Destination, which is a fantastic book, and The Demolished Man. He's one of those authors that did a lot of short stories, but only really had about 2 novels to his name.
Oh, The Demolished Man is fantastic, though.
It's great. I love it, and I love his.
Pardon? If I remember correctly, isn't that the one where a guy is trapped on a spaceship and he figures out how to teleport? Like,
no, that's The Star's My Destination.
Oh, that's The Stars. Sorry.
The Demolished Man's about a society of psychics known as espers, and there's first, second, and third class espers, and there's a guy, a rich entrepreneur who's not a psychic, who needs to try and commit murder against his competitor.
Oh, yes. And he's trying to get around it. Yes, I remember. By
singing a jingle in his head.
Yeah.
And then there's a second class esper cop trying to go after him. And it's great. But The Star's My Destination is fantastic, because that's a world full of people who can teleport called jaunters.
Yeah.
And again, I love the way he implements class systems into it. So you've got different classes of jaunters, people who can teleport 1,000 miles, 500 miles, etc. And yeah, it's a great program. I said this to Sean, so you got to read this book. Like, in my wildest fantasies, I would love to be the guy that bought the rights to that book and got that made into a series, because it needs to be made.
That would look fantastic if they made it. I read it shortly after I saw Jumper. And while Jumper's not a great movie, I imagine the way they teleport is how they do it in Jumper. Like, it's just like smoky stuff.
Yeah, it's described in the book as, and from a physics perspective, I think this would be accurate. There's that pop of air quickly filling the vacuum. But it's only described once or twice in the whole book, that pop sound. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's how it would be.
Yeah.
Unlike Nightcrawler, that black smoke, even though that's cool, you know what I mean? Because he goes into a little demon world, doesn't he?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Sean hasn't read it, because I was literally about to talk about something, and I was like, oh no, better not spoil that.
Yeah, you've got to read it, man, because it's in the Sci-Fi Masterworks. And again, he was probably one of the early inspirations when it came to that concise brevity, kinetic style.
Yes, very much so.
And he's got a short story collection called Virtual Unrealities, and like most short stories, a lot of them are hit and miss, but some of them are fantastic. Philip K. Dick himself's got some great short stories, and you can see the inspiration behind a lot of the things. I've got We Could Sell It to You for You Wholesale.
Yes,
volume 5 is of his short stories, and one of the short stories introduces what would become the empathy box in androids.
That's right. Yeah. The Mercer.
Yeah. I mean, I want to go talk about that again. That's great. Great book.
You could do a whole episode just on Philip K. Dick, I feel.
Yeah,
I
mean,
probably 100%.
I know you're a busy man, but we'd love to catch up with you again soon and chat some
more.
Yeah,
absolutely, delighted.
I'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, here's one for you. What's a movie you love that everybody does not like?
That
not even a cult film. Just like if you said it, everyone's going to be like, "Oh, what are you
doing?" That's a good question, actually. I'm not saying I'm super popular with my choices. I know people question why I like the Fast and the Furious movies.
I get it though, especially those first ones. Tokyo Drift's amazing.
And yeah, that's kind of what it is. It's like sometimes the brain doesn't need to be engaged. I just need shiny things in front of me to keep me entertained for half an hour or something. Like my wife is often like, she's like, you like Blade Runner, you like, Usual Suspects, you love The Shawshank Redemption, and then you sit down and you watch the new Fast and the Furious trailer like it's like Oscar. And I was like, yeah, it's awesome, it's brilliant.
There was a funny meme that came out after the last Fast and Furious movie I watched was number 6. I watched it in the cinema and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I could see why the films were becoming more and more successful, because watching that 6th film with The Rock, with with Paul Walker and Vin Diesel and the whole crew. I was like, yeah, these films have had a soft reboot. I think number 5 was the soft reboot where they started doing heists rather than racing.
Yeah,
and I totally digged it. But there was a meme that came out because in the finale of Fast and Furious 6, they're fighting on an airport runway as the plane is moving, and the meme came out saying how long an airline, what did they call them again? Runway. That's runway. It. How long an runway is in real life? How long it is in Fast and Furious 6? It was just the size of Europe.
Yeah, yeah. That was the longest takeoff ever.
It just went on forever, and then people try to argue, "Oh no, you see in different perspectives," bollocks.
No, absolutely.
But I do need to see number 7. Actually, in fact, I need to see number 4 and 5. I haven't seen them. I've seen bits of them.
I usually tell people to actually start on with number 4. I loved 1. 2 was okay. I'm not a huge fan of Drift. I'd say it's the weakest of the whole lot of them.
Oh yeah, I think it's because
the only problem is Drift sets up something.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
6, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, towards the end of 6. Yeah. Which is kind of now that I'm older, I look back at that. I think that's a bit lame. I mean, at the time when I was 21, I was like, "That's amazing! Wow, well done." But that's kind of shoehorned in there, isn't it?
I think 6. Yeah, it's shoehorned in there. I think 6 came out around the time when the MCU was like really starting to kick off with a lot of the tie-back stuff.
Yeah.
And it kind of just felt like Fast and Furious were like, oh shit, this seems to be a really popular gimmick, so we're going to tie back to a movie from the previous. It's like, which one will we pick? Just fuck it into 3, it'll be fine.
I think the only reason I like Tokyo Drift is because we were 14 when that film came out, and I was a big fan of Need for Speed at the time, so I would play Need for Speed Carbon, which was, they sort of had this weird relationship going on where the Need for Speed games would be similar to the Fast and Furious movie, and there was a lot of drifting going on in Need for Speed Carbon, so that's why I kind of like that film. Maybe it's a nostalgia thing. I'm like, oh yeah, it reminds me of being 14 and playing Need for Speed.
Yeah, Underground would have been the one that I got attached to with because I think Underground came out roughly when the first one came out as well.
Yeah. Neon lights classic.
And the neon lights,
and those scenes when like he presses the NOS button, it goes like that, and everyone's
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, and you learn later on as you become older that NOS is odorless. It's like there's no color to it.
Yeah.
And I tell you mine right. Matthew Broderick's Godzilla. I love it. Everyone hates it.
Everyone hates it. Yeah. No, that was a good movie though. It really was.
I remember KFC. This was back in the 90s when like some of your Happy Meal toys were amazing. KFC did a promotional Godzilla glove puppet thing that was so detailed, and you do that and it do the Godzilla, you know what I mean? And it was such a good toy. I don't know what McDonald's are doing these days. Like you go to France when I lived there, and the only thing you got for a toy was a DVD about dancing penguins. The French is just like, you find your own happiness. There you go. Fuck off.
I remember I was talking about this only recently with somebody. Do you remember when cereal used to have prizes in it?
Yeah. You'd get,
when did that stop?
About when
someone must have choked on it at some point.
Oh, bound to be.
That's got to be why.
Well, when I was 8, I ate a lot of cornflakes because you'd get tokens on the backs of boxes, and it got to the
point the guy who ruined it.
Yeah, right. So you collect tokens on the backs of boxes, but depending on the size of the box, depending on what denomination of token you got. So those big kilogram boxes of cornflakes will get you 4 tokens.
Yes.
And it said on the back, if you get 86 tokens, you're going to get the Kellogg's Cornflake Radio. But if you got 24, you get the Kellogg's Cornflake Watch. And that's what I was after. Right. And I was only 7 at the time. So my family could see the commitment, the amount of cornflakes I was eating to get this. Like it even got to the point where like friends of my mum were like coming and saying, oh, I've got some cornflake tokens for you. You know what I mean? I was that dedicated, and I got that watch, and I'm gutted that I don't have that watch anymore.
I remember in college, there was a Coke promotion. It was like, the code on the label, you put them in, and after you collected the amount of codes, you were able to get like an inflatable sofa, I think it was. And we were sitting down to lunch. One of the lads was like, read the back of the bottle, and he's like, Jesus, inflatable sofa for the house, that'd be really good. And it's like, I'm not going to be able to drink 70 bottles of Coke though. So then he goes, hang on a second, and he literally just got up and walked around the whole canteen hall and went up to every single table. Are you going to take that label? And if they said no, he pulled it off. And I think he got like 50 codes in the space of one lunch hour. And then he's like, 20 bottles I can drink. So he drank 20 bottles in himself, and he got the inflatable sofa for his house.
No way. That is commitment.
Yeah, I was well into tokens back then. I used to like take tokens out the newspaper on a Sunday and give them to school. So I don't know, I can't even remember. It's a very loose memory, but there's something involved with you take them to school and all that, and it's all good and all that.
Yeah, my mum would make me collect the 950 holiday tokens because it was just something to do. Like.
That's a con. I used to work at Holiday Park. You don't get a £9.50 Sun holiday. It has to be 4 people attending that holiday.
My mum didn't tell me that when I was a kid. She went like, Sean, look, it's not £9.50, but collect them anyway.
That pays for the caravan. It doesn't pay for the event pass to get into the complex. It doesn't pay for your gas, your electric, your bedding. It doesn't pay for any of that. So just putting out there, this YouTube video might get deleted now for me saying that. But
the Great Holiday Park Ponzi scheme.
Sungate.
Sungate.
But yeah.
Save her ban from YouTube. Sungate.
But anyway, yeah. So Derek, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. 100%.
Next time we do this, I would have read the series, so we'll have a lot more to talk about. I mean, we've got plenty to talk about anyway. I could talk about all the things we're talking about. I could talk about it even more, but I know you're a busy man. But I'd like to do a deep dive on the series.
Cool.
The Filthy Harry series. And yeah, I hope best of luck to you on your 5th book.
Thanks very much.
It must be, no doubt it's difficult. It's one thing being consistent in tone with one book, but to be consistent over multiple books, that must be something else.
Yeah, I have 2 problems actually. I think I put something into book 3 before, and then I was like, oh, hold on a second. I think in book 2, I totally just contradicted what I just typed in. And since book 2 is out there, I have to go back to book 3 and fix what was there.
It's going to get to the point where you're going to do a Stephen King with the Dark Tower series, where the characters are going to come out the book to try and save you.
Yeah, hopefully they can start writing it then for me. That'd be the best part.
And you're going to end the book the same way the book began.
I'll become the book.
Yeah, that's
Page master.
Brilliant.
And best of luck shopping your one around.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Like I said, it's just basically making sure I nail that covering letter and doing my research on the agents, and I'm going to go the agent route because I think that gives you kind of a bit more credibility when dealing with publishers, I think.
Oh, most publishers won't even talk to you.
Yeah, that's it. So I'm going down the agent route.
Yeah.
Good luck finishing mine. All right.
Yeah, you're going to be all right, Sean. I'm going to help you.
I'll get it.
You can't rewrite You can't rewrite a blank page.
All the time in the world.
Yeah.
500 words a day. 500 words a day. That's all you need to do.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
And yeah, pleasure meeting you, man. Pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.